freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 329 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme today is Convention of States and the Arizona Audit. And our guest is Arizona Senator Kelly Townsend. Senator Townsend has proudly served the citizens of the 16th Legislative District since 2013.
Yes, and Kelly is an accomplished author with books published in the United States, Croatia, and Slovenia. She has also served in the Navy, so thank you for your service. She is well-traveled internationally with a deep interest in other cultures and customs, languages, and of course, international and state government. What a resource you are for our beautiful state of Arizona. Welcome to the show, Arizona Senator Kelly Townsend.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So much going on in our state. Always. This is such a lively state. And, you know, California gets a lot of the national attention and New York gets a lot of the national attention. But Arizona is a very active state and active for liberties and active for freedom. And right now, the big thing that all eyes, not just across our nation, but the world, the entire planet, is what's going on with the Election Integrity Audit. And you have been such a driving force to make sure that we are able to, you know, look and see. That's all we're trying to do, right? Just look and see, just like any other audit. And you've been such a driving force in that. And I'm hoping you can give us a little bit of an update, like what is happening? What do we anticipate to happen?
I am so glad you asked that question because that is one of the most important, if not the most important thing going on in the United States right now is this forensic audit that's happening in Arizona. Now, we had some very surface level audits that happened at a per statute that they did, but it didn't show anything. It didn't show a large sample of the paper, of the actual ink versus was it pre-filled out, that type of thing. So this is an actual forensic audit. So when you hear this is the fourth or the fifth time Arizona's audited their election, that is not true at all. And I think your listeners probably know that by now. So they have gone through that process. Right now, they're tightening up all the numbers, making sure, double checking, triple checking. They're even running them back through to get an inventory of exactly how many ballots are going back to the county supervisors so that there's no question, this is what we have and this is what we're giving you. They vacated the Coliseum and now they're over in the Wesley Bowling building. And so we should start to see some information next month. I know everybody wants it right now. Like, what were the numbers? Just tell us what they were. And a lot of impatience because we've waited this long. This should have been started back in November. But once again, this is the first time this has ever happened. So Arizona's kind of paving the way on how to do this. And now what we're seeing as other states, Pennsylvania, are talking about doing their own audits. So if nothing else, Arizona is kind of laying the foundations to how to do this going forward.
Absolutely. We are trailblazers in that arena. And one of the things that has been such a head scratcher for Dan and I is, you know, we're business owners. So we have our federal firearms license. And so we are audited regularly by the ATF. They come in, they say, show us your work, show us your books, right? So we do. It's not a constitutional crisis to show your work. As just citizens, we've had an audit by the IRS. Let's see, you're probably law abiding with your finances, but let's just take a look see, right? It's not like it was fun to go through, but again, it's not a constitutional crisis. What is the deal? Why has this become such a political hot button with this election integrity audit? You would think that both major parties, all political parties, would have equal interest in finding out, was it done well? Are there things we could do better?
Any thinking person can draw the conclusion that the effort that they went to, the Secretary of State, the county supervisors in Maricopa County, the effort they've gone to try and stop us, it has been so extraordinary. Your logical conclusion is there's something there they don't want us to see. So even if we never get results, there's no way to not conclude that. I could tell you so many things that really raise your eyebrows and say, why are Republican county supervisors going to such extents? Well, if I were them and I signed off and said this was a perfect election, everything's kosher, and then along comes a forensic audit, and if there's something that's going to be wrong, whose name is on the line once we find it? So, I'm not accusing them of anything. I'm just I'm going from A to B.
Yes.
And we're not done, by the way, with our audits. We had various companies like Facebook come to Arizona and give $6 million to the county recorders to run their elections, and $3 million plus to the Secretary of State to do things in her office with our elections. And my question is, well, first of all, Jake Hoffman, Representative Hoffman, freshman in the Arizona House of Representatives, ran a bill to outlaw that practice of having outside money coming in being used in elections. It's just wholly inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But my question was, what did we spend that on? I'd like to see it. So we have what's called the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and we are in charge of the Auditor General here in Arizona. So in our budget, I asked her, how much would it cost you to audit the Facebook money? And she came back and it's just $160,000, which is nothing compared to our budget that we have here. And so that was one of my asks in the budget, is that we include language that requires an audit of the Facebook money. One of the things the Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, said is she used it to combat disinformation and misinformation. Well, what does that mean? What did that look like? What kind of misinformation and disinformation, define that for us, Ms. Hobbs, because, I'm very curious. So we're not done with the auditing. We're still going, and we're going to find out what in the world have they done with our election here in Arizona.
Kelly,
Absolutely.
I've studied this, what you guys are doing right now, and I believe that whatever the results are, I'm going to believe in the results. Mm-hmm. I think that you guys are putting enough into this that the true facts are going to come out. So if the election comes out that it was clean, I'm good with it. Mm-hmm. But now the question is, and which I'm thinking,
we would hope that would be the best thing ever, is if it came out clean. But do we really believe that's going to happen?
But what I worry about with all the cover up, with all the people fighting to do the audit, all this other things, that we might find some things that are not going to be positive for the elections. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, what next?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have 90 of us legislators down here, right? And we have several of us, we serve on different committees. We each usually have about 3 committees that we serve on. The committee that's been driving this audit this whole time has been the Judiciary Committee here in the Arizona Senate. It was chaired last year by Eddie Farnsworth, and he put out the original subpoena, which the Maricopa County supervisors ignored until we went into session. We can't enforce that subpoena when we're not in session, unfortunately. So we came in session in January. Eddie Farnsworth retired, and now we have Warren Peterson, who reissued another subpoena, which they ignored. And so they are responsible for the judicial side of things, the subpoenas, and if there's anything legally that we need to do once we get these results. My fear was, if we need to change legislation to prevent this from happening in 2022, because we're looking forward and we're also looking back. The audit's looking back, but 2022, the primary elections in August, early August, I think it's August 2nd. That's right around the corner.
Yes.
And so if we were to pass bills next year, if we don't close session by April 30th, those bills won't be in effect until after the primary. So we'll have 2020 rules in place for the primary election when it comes to things like election security, chain of custody, who has access to the hard drives, who has access to all of these things, who had it, where did it go? And there's a lot of holes there, the thumb drives and the hard drives and the Dominion employees having access to all of that. I want every single step of the way logged, who had it where. And I wasn't able to get those bills passed for a couple of reasons, and I can mention those in a minute. But I was very concerned that we would go home this year and close session, sine die is what we call it. We would sine die and then not be able to change the law for next year's primary. So we either have to close session next year, sine die, by August 30th to give the 90 days to pass so that it'll go into effect before the primary, or whatever changes we put have to either be done this year or be put into next year's budget, which it's not really appropriate to be doing laws in the budget. It happens, but I'd rather it be done this year. So I could see it coming that we were going to have to go home sine die, because we usually go home end of April or into May. And this is the third longest session we had this year. In Arizona history. And so we couldn't continue to extend the session throughout the year. I thought we could, but it was hard. It was a train that was hard to stop. So I could see that coming. So another ask I had in the budget was that we created a special committee that would review the outcome of the audit, not so that we could take them to court or that type of thing, but that we could look to see if there's any legislation that needs to happen this year so that it could be in place for the primary next year. And that if we do find that these statutes need to be changed about the chain of custody, then we can do that in a special session this year. The governor would have to call us in, and that's Article 4, Part 2, Section 3 of the Arizona Constitution, how we come back in for a special session so that we could pass laws before next year's January session. I hope that makes sense. So that special committee is created. As soon as we get those finals report from the auditors, then this committee will convene to go over those reports to find out what do we have to do to change in the laws to prevent these things from happening next year. Now, we have two of the committee members are also on judiciary, so there's a crossover there. So we'll have continuity of information. And, so it's going to be interesting. And I'll be focused on legislation. Warren Peterson and Sonny Borelli and Karen Fan will be focused on the litigation, if any, and what to do about the legal aspects of the audit.
Well, thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for walking us through that. Now, when you say that our governor is going to need to call a special session, I haven't seen a whole lot of excitement and energy from him to support this audit. And he was on Sean Hannity's show one evening not too long ago, and he was one that quoted, well, this is our fourth audit, and so the other audits turned out fine. And I thought, I'm sorry, could I rewind that? Did I hear him say that correctly? Because that was it was dismissive of the work being done and the level of excellence and integrity that's in play with this audit. And it just, to me, showed that he really is not in favor of this audit taking place, which doesn't make sense to me. But if we're counting on him to be the one that called a special session, do you think that he's going to do that?
Well, I sat with his chief of staff and we discussed this issue. And I said, well, maybe he could call us just a general special session now so that we will be in session. And then when the results come out, and they said, no, you need to have a specific reason, a specific time frame. You need to show that you have the votes. You need to have the language all set. And then he calls the special session. So he wasn't willing to do it without those things. But they said, if the audit shows that there's irregularities to the point that we need to fix it in the statutes, then you guys make that recommendation. He didn't give a promise and say he will call it, but he said that's there's no reason why he shouldn't call it if that's our recommendation. If we have that committee plus the Judiciary Committee plus committees over in the House plus all of the public, I mean, that's the best we can do. I wish we would have stayed in session. That was my goal. I voted no. I put it into the record because we didn't have a vote where we were up on the board. It was just a voice vote. So I asked, a point of order that they put into the into the journal that I would have been a no if they'd have called a vote on special sessions. So, or ending sine die. Yeah, so it's unfortunate that we had to go home, but we've done that. And I hope that the governor will do that for us. If he doesn't, I still have 2 other ways to get this taken care of before next August. So it's not the end of the world, but I think we should do it sooner rather than later.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, he is in lame duck mode, to be honest. Doug Ducey, he's timing out. He's not going to run again. He might run for something else. So it might be important for him to, try to.
Wait a minute. It doesn't matter if he is or not. He should be as a concerned citizen that we get clean elections.
Should.
And
absolutely.
what is wrong with a clean election? I mean, I understand why they're covering up things right now, but he should be for that no matter what.
I agree with you. I'm just pointing out that he's maybe going to be leaving public office. And we've seen other elected officials here in Arizona. Yep. We expected them to do one thing that was, of the conservative nature. And then out of the blue, they turn around and do something that's not conservative of nature. And he could do the same thing. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I can say it's been a frustrating year, first of all, last year, especially when we were not in session and all those executive orders came in. But I will say the things that I asked for in the budget, like ending the state of emergency and rescinding a lot of his executive orders, and he has done a lot of that. He has started to move in a different direction like that than he was last year. So I'm kind of hoping, I've got my fingers crossed, and I want to believe that he'll do it. But more frustrating than that is our own folks on our side, supposed conservatives, killing those bills that needed to have been done. We already knew. I had several, right behind me is this whiteboard, all these bills that were having to do with election, not integrity, not housekeeping bills, but election security that we saw that happened in the 2020 election. And those, half of them never even got a hearing in the government committee. The other few that were let out of the government committee went to the House and died over in the House. And in the end, I got one of them. I took all those bills and crammed them into one, and it came back to the Senate only to be killed again by the same chairwoman that wouldn't give them a hearing in the first place. Not because the issues were bad or the language was bad, but because I went around her and didn't, she killed him first. I went around her and she killed him again. And it's just, and now she's running for Secretary of State. I don't know how she can, with a straight face, yes, I'm frustrated with the governor, but the governor was really gracious during this budget of giving us several things that we asked for when it came to election integrity and the executive orders and that type of thing. And as frustrating as it has been with him, I am just incensed that this legislator, a so-called senator running for Secretary of State, would have the audacity to kill very good election integrity because I went around her. And it tells you what her priorities are.
Right. And that's somebody of your same party, right? This
is Senator Ugenta-Rita. She's running for Secretary of State. I don't understand.
That's not being a representative. That's being a leader. That's control. To me, they're not serving the people when they take things like that into consideration.
So Dan uses the word leader in place of ruler because he feels you guys are here to serve us, right? That there's that upside down of our elected officials should be public servants.
Well, let me give you 2 other options that you could use too. You have a politician And when they make decisions, they make a decision based on what's best for my next election. If I do this, is it going to help or hurt? And then you have a statesman. And the statesman just does what's supposed to be done for the good of the people, for the good of the state, and lets the chips fall where they may. And if they get unelected because of it, they can hold their head and look in the mirror and be proud of themselves and say, I did the best I could, and this was the price I had to pay. And that's a statesman. So what I try to educate people is start asking questions to these people running for office. What would you do in this situation? I don't know if you can get a straight answer out of them. But then, and then once they're elected, watch how they are voting. Are they testing the political winds, or are they just voting what needs to happen? And I put my faith in veterans a lot of times, but not even sometimes veterans let us down. So it's hard to do that. So sometimes you have to go with somebody with a track record. But definitely politicians are making decisions based on their careers, and that's a shame. It's a real shame.
And you as in the legislature, you listen to what people tell you. Unfortunately, the people that are quiet, like we are, when we were quiet, we're not anymore, but it's the ones that scream the loudest that get heard, and that's not necessarily what's representing your area. It's just a few people that are screaming loud. Right. How do you divide that?
Yeah.
Well, you filter everything through the lens of the Constitution. For example, last year, when we went home for the year, we were told we'd be right back the next week with a special session. The Speaker of the House told us when I was over in the House, we'll go ahead and close sine die, and we'll be back next week, and we'll take care of those issues of yours next week. And depending on who you ask, the reason why we didn't come back is different. But the point is, we didn't come back. The next thing we knew, we had executive order, and we were not at the table to give input. For example, Scottsdale had a lot of nightclubs, and several of them were breaking the rules. So an executive order went out about dancing and, bars and all of this other stuff. And little towns like Tombstone and Bisbee and other places like that don't have big nightclubs, that have little establishments that rely solely on tourism, and people coming down there, had to close their doors. And we've seen so many businesses go out of business because of it, because of something one area of the state did impacted the entire state. Maybe one of our rural legislators could have come and said, this is probably should be done by county instead of statewide, or, just given some input, but we couldn't do that. We weren't at the table. And so when I say filter it through the Constitution, what does that have to do with it? Well, Article 4, Section 4, that's easy to remember. I want to get earrings that have 4s on them, Article 4, Section 4. Dang it. I've said this so many times in this last year.
I love it.
It guarantees the people a Republican form of government, not Democrat Republican, but Republican meaning you have a representative to speak on your behalf, and they go down and they argue for you, and and then the legislature passes laws and the governor signs it. Not the governor writes a bunch of executive orders. And so I think the governor's kind of learned along the way. I hope there was one veto that he did and rewrote it and put an executive order out, and there was a huge outcry. We haven't seen that happen anymore. But yes, Article 4, Section 4 gives you the right to have a representative voting on your behalf. And we completely trounced that last year. And a lot of people didn't even realize that that right of theirs was being violated. And a lot of people were so afraid, if they did realize it, they allowed it because of fear. So first you have to go through the Constitution and say, is this even constitutional? And that's basically what my starting point is.
Well, Kelly, I hope that people woke up because of COVID. A lot of people, I think they have.
I think so too.
So it's going to make your job more interesting. Right?
Yeah. We love feedback. I love feedback,
Yes.
And so the good and the bad.
Well, you are such a defender of the Constitution, and I love that you talk about everything through that lens. Every year, our team is part of organizing a Second Amendment rally on the lawn of our Arizona State Capitol building. We partner with Writers USA, awesome people, and you have been one of our speakers every year. And sometimes you don't know when you put a speaker in front of the microphone, okay, what exactly are they gonna say? Are they gonna make it a, okay, now it's gonna be a political speech about me and reelecting me? And you never go that route. You keep it about what is best for the people. And I just really appreciate you for that.
Thank you. Well, I enjoy coming and speaking with everybody and seeing the guys down there and the ladies that are it's so important to protect the Second Amendment, and that's pretty much the first one, right? It should protect the second protects the first, and on the rest. And I was just thinking about that today, and I so appreciate you guys for being involved in putting that on. I see you there every time too, and you're always so dynamic. So it's good to get out and do that. But you're right that, Dan, that we need to be louder about that. And they were teasing Joe Biden on the radio down in Tucson today about what to do if the people come door to door asking about your vaccine status. Remember that time where he was like, "Yeah, you just need a double barrel shotgun out here," and take care of
the worst gun advice ever comes from our current President Joe Biden.
Here's my vaccination ID. It's a 12 gauge.
Oh my gosh. Well, we need to start wrapping. I know you're a very busy person, but you are a fierce defender of the Constitution, and you are a national leader in the Article 5 movement. What is the Article 5 movement?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Before I talk about Article 5, let me talk about conventions of state, because the Article 5 and conventions of state kind of melted into one, that they kind of interchangeable, like an Article 5 convention is a convention of state. And so I want to just educate your listeners that the conventions of state used to happen annually, frequently, prior to the Civil War. So they would get together and they would convene as state legislatures. And they would talk about whatever issues they were facing at the time, anything from trade to Indian relations, to defending the country, to farming and the price of seed and whatever, and whether or not silver would become money or not, or who should pay for the railroad tracks getting laid down across the country. Should it be the railroad companies or the people and the taxpayer, which is a similar argument to today with the light rail. So those were conventions of states. And one of the conventions of states that they came together was to talk about the Constitution and talk about the Articles of Confederation, actually, and they ended up with the Constitution. That was one of many of the conventions. So in the Constitution, there is a provision for the states to come together in a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. So unlike the railroad or the silver or the Indian issues or whatever, another issue that they get together on is to amend the Constitution. There's two ways to do it. The first way is 2/3 of Congress vote on whatever the amendment is, and then they send that out to the states for ratification. If that passes by 2/3 in the Congress, then they need 3/4 of the states to ratify it, and then it becomes part of the Constitution. But Part B, right up behind me here, George Mason, he was very adamant that there would come a time when Congress needed to be put into check themselves, and they would never do that. Like, for example, have a balanced budget, or maybe term limits or whatever else, and they're not going to do that on themselves. So the people ought to be able to do that, and the people are closest to their legislators. And so he argued that the legislatures would be able to to petition Congress for a convention to propose the amendments themselves. So Part B of Article 5 basically says, if 2/3 of the states petition Congress, Congress shall call a convention, and then in the convention, they would come up with whatever the amendment was going to be, and then send it back to Congress, and then Congress would send it out for ratification. Kind of complicated, but that way of amending the Constitution has yet to happen. And we are at that time where it's time to check Congress and get them under control. The kind of spending that I was reading an article today where people are demanding $2,000 a month checks from now on until the crisis is over, which in my mind is probably never going to happen at this point because they're not letting go of that control. So, I mean, that's socialism just completely unchecked. And Congress is completely out of control when it comes to spending. So it's time. And we have, I'm not sure how many states we have. I think we're close to 31, 32 states with a balanced budget amendment. And also term limits is gearing up. So we're getting there. And one of the questions is, will Congress wait till we get to the 34th state? What the state does is they pass a resolution and they vote on it and it goes to Congress. Will they wait till we get to 34 states doing that, or will they impose it on themselves? Does it force their hand? And I'm of the mind to think that they're going to do it before we're going to be able to do it. So if nothing else, this gets them to do it, at least to get something on the books to prevent them from just spending us into oblivion.
It's just craziness.
Can you imagine trying to run a business that way? I wouldn't. Where do you get money?
Yeah.
Look what's going on. I asked Congressman Biggs, where's the money coming from for that first stimulus check, And he said they're selling bonds and they're printing, digital printing. And he said, who's buying the bonds? The wealthy over in China are buying our bonds. And that's frightening. That's really frightening. And we have done this to ourselves.
Yeah.
We have done this to ourselves because of the lack of discipline when it comes to spending. And you've seen the projects, how do a study on turtles crossing the road or something, ridiculous studies that basically what you're doing is you're just employing people in a university that need a study to do, and you're just keeping them going. And then what do they come up with? These radical leftist ideas that are completely destroying our country and the minds of our children. So, I could go on all day about that. So what's the answer? Many think it's an Article 5 convention, that we get them under control or at least force our hand to do it, because it's too far. And I don't know if it's too late to turn back at this point with China and what they're doing. It's getting kind of frightening. So one of the first things that needs to happen is to get the spending under control.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, I would love it maybe if you talk about the Convention of States at this year's rally. Because I don't think enough people understand it or know. And when I very first heard that phrase, it's been probably 12, 15 years ago, it seemed radical. And it was phrased to me as though, well, there's going to be a bunch of states that break off or something. And it was somehow connected to this Convention of States. And it was like, no, that's unconstitutional. That's illegal. I wouldn't be part of something like that. And so there could be people like me that was what they heard back in the day. And then they've just never moved forward with fresh new information and really understood what it is.
So
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what I tell people, because there's an argument out there that once you open it up to a convention, that anything can happen. And let's say that they propose an amendment to abolish the Second Amendment, right? Let's just say that that's what these legislators come together, and the purpose of the convention was a balanced budget amendment. But once they gavel in, okay, we're going to propose actually to remove the Second Amendment. Wow. Now, first of all, let's just say that somebody proposes that. They would need the majority vote of the legislators present, and I don't think that's going to happen. But let's just say it does. Let's say that the convention decided on their own that they're going to pass this. First of all, a passed resolution, even if it's rogue, because it has to be whatever the resolution called the thing for a balanced budget, that's the only legal amendment they can produce from that. But let's just say that they ignore that and they do it anyway, and they have this Second Amendment amendment to the Constitution and to abolish it. And so let's say that passes out. It's not legal and binding at that point. It still has to be ratified. So they could pass that out all day, but Congress would have to then accept it as a legal amendment that they passed, even though it was outside of the call that they came together for. Congress should only be taking and accepting an amendment that had to do with a balanced budget. So I think that Congress won't accept an amendment like that. But let's just say that they do, and they receive that and they send it out to the states. You need 38 states to ratify that amendment. You barely have, I think we have 11 blue states. You're not going to get 38 states to ratify that. So it's going to sit there like many other amendments to the Constitution that never got ratified. It's not going to be ratified. And even if it went out, I think the Supreme Court would knock it down because it's not a legal amendment because it was done outside of the call. So there's several checks and balances along the way. I don't think it ever gets there. I don't think it ever even gets voted on. I think that the convention will move to strike that it's out of order because it's outside the call of the convention. I don't think it even gets the time of day. But assuming it did and got all the way, it's not going to get ratified. So we have a tool that George Mason gave us to bring in Congress and get them under control. And we're not using it because someone's afraid that, this runaway convention, they call it. And it's a shame because we could fix this. And we're not doing it because of fear. Mm-hmm. And I think it's time. And the only other option is to get congressmen elected and take back the Senate and the House and get a super majority there and then propose the amendment that way. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that, for Congress to put a check on themselves like that. I think we need to get super close to 32, 33 states and then they'll move. And that's the only way to do it.
So it takes 38 or 34 and then 38 to approve it.
So step 1 is 34 and final step's 38 to ratify. So whatever ends up being done and surviving a legal challenge, if it survives a legal challenge and goes out to the states, you need 38 states to ratify it. So like, for example, the Equal Rights Amendment for women, it has 37 states. It just needs one more state, but that's a whole nother topic. That's expired. There's no way for that to legally be ratified now, but it's every year they try and they can't do it. So there's several other amendments that have been sitting out there that didn't get ratified. And I think that anything illegal that came out of a convention wouldn't be ratified. So it's not a realistic fear. It really is. And I'll tell you, when I first got involved, I found out about it. I was exactly in the same way. There's no way I'm letting them touch this, and I'm going to be at the table to make sure they don't mess it up. And the more I learned, I thought, wait a minute, actually, this is a viable way to change the Constitution. And it's going to need blue states, but we're mostly red states. When I say that, I mean legislatures. I don't mean Congress or their governors, I'm talking about the legislatures. We're primarily a red country when it comes to legislatures, but we don't have 38 red states either. So to overturn Roe v. Wade, the Democrats are worried about us doing that. We couldn't because we don't have 38 red states. It would have to be something that would take both. And I think really the only issue where we can get both sides to ratify is term limits. So my prediction is term limits would be the first one to get ratified because we don't have, enough of one side or the other. And I forgot to mention too, if we just start ignoring everything and push through a rogue amendment to the Constitution and the Supreme Court upholds it and all that, we've got bigger problems. If we allow that, then the country's already gone. So I think this is a viable way to rein in Congress and to deal with issues like term limits and a balanced budget amendment. And I think it should be pursued.
I like it. And, the idea that, we started this conversation talking about the audit. Well, why are we auditing the election? Well, we should probably audit every election anyway. But this particular one just feels wrong. It just smells wrong. There's just something about it, right? So there are people walking around right now today that feel like, why should I bother voting? What's the point, right? And so if we had something like a convention of states, they might feel like, well, this is a place that my voice might actually matter, and we'll build from there. And so I think it can only be a positive thing. The more involved the citizenry is in their government, the better, because that's where we started, right? Our founding fathers, they put everything on the line to have the opportunity to write our playbook, our roadmap, our recipe book called our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And too many of us sit back in lazy mode and just abdicate. Well, somebody's taking care of it somewhere, I guess. It's fine. Send me my $2,000 check.
Right. And I like to tell the story of Ben Franklin, and, those who've done some history studying him know that he was kind of a tramp, and and you
Yes.
look at all the founders, and they're just regular people that were going about their lives, and they ended up having this King George III was actually insane, and they had an insane king, and they had to stop what they were doing and do something about it. And that's kind of what we're doing now, is people have to stop what you're doing. We've been all busy. Remember the 80s, the biggest problem in the 80s was world hunger. And we sang, "We are the world." That was the big deal. Now it's, am I even going to be able to afford to rent a house or to have a mortgage, or, the price of lumber and the hyperinflation that's coming? We're in serious trouble. So we have to stop what we're doing. All of us, not just the politicians and the statesmen, but all of us have to stop what we're doing. Become a precinct committeeman. Get involved in your local groups there in town, and get involved in your Second Amendment groups, whatever. But find somewhere where you could serve, and stop what you're doing. Whether you're a George Washington or a Ben Franklin or somewhere in the between, we all have a role to play. We're up to bat right now, and we have to stand up, or we're very quickly losing this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say tramp, you mean ladies, man, right?
That's what I mean. Yes,
Ladies, man.
that's right.
Kelly, we interview a lot of people, and, I learned through the show that there was a governor in New Jersey that said that the Constitution was above his pay grade. And I wonder, with your job, you have fellow legislators, are there some that just don't get the Constitution?
Yeah.
Doesn't that
Yeah,
irritate you?
yeah, it does. Even some of our veterans in the past, and I think that our generation, maybe, I don't know who to even point to, but it's not something we learned. We know the amendments, but who knows what Article 4 is? We talked about Article 5, but what's Article 4? And we talked about Article 4, Section 4. Remember the earrings?
Yes,
Right.
I do.
One of the most important parts of the Constitution, and it's a pretty short document. And here's another one, Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers, what the federal government's supposed to be in charge of, and everything else is supposed to be delegated to the states. And yet the federal government is involved in almost every aspect of our lives. So we're way outside of the Constitution and what the founders had intended. So if we don't know the Constitution, and we don't know, is this a federal function or is this a state function? And if we don't know those things, then what's happened is going to happen, because we don't know that it's being violated. So
Or how about it's not for the government to function in that area, period.
all right. Amen. Amen.
But it's almost like if we could interview every politician and question them on the Constitution to decide whether or not we're going to vote for them, because that's ignored. We don't even question the Constitution when we see who we're going to run for.
Right.
We had a very important sheriff election last year, and
Maricopa
my deal
County.
was, do you follow the Constitution?
Mhm.
Period. Because he's chief law enforcement, right? It's important to know that your sheriff is following the Constitution.
Mhm.
And they don't know it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, my sheriff out in Pinal County, Sheriff Lamb,
Yeah,
he's
brag
made-
a little bit. Why don't you
Yeah.
brag? Because you are
I-
Sheriff Lamb.
I love Sheriff Lamb, and I called him up, by the way. I want to get this in before we go. I asked him, I said, we've got a lot of people in meltdown mode about these people going door to door, right? What can we do? And I think this is your jurisdiction here. If somebody comes to someone's property and won't leave and is badgering them, and honestly, I think that they're collecting information about who's vaccinated, who isn't. And today I heard on the radio also that's on the form for the volunteers to find out and log in, because that's important information for the health department to know, is who's vaccinated, who isn't. So if you don't want them coming to your door asking you that, what can we do? And he said, you can put up a no trespassing sign, and even he can't go there without a warrant. If there's a no trespassing sign and the homeowner says, get off my property, law enforcement can't even be there unless you've done something wrong, or if there's an exigent circumstance, or they have a warrant. So he's like, just put up a no trespassing sign, and you can tell them to leave. You don't have to answer their questions, and it doesn't need to be a drama. They just have to leave. And if they won't leave, then you can call and have them come down and deal with it.
That's awesome. And yes, Sheriff Lamb is amazing.
He is. You guys got
And
the
we
best
need
sheriff ever.
we need more like him because he is so constitutionally based and a nice person besides. But here in Maricopa County, we don't have Sheriff Lamb, so we're jealous. And we did our best to vote in as close to a Sheriff Lamb as we could get. And I have no idea right now. I think the Arizona audit, it's going up ballot. It's not coming down ballot. But if by some chance it ends up coming down ballot and we see the sheriff votes, maybe we did get the sheriff I wanted.
Well, and there is a possibility that there's two companies out there that can scan the ballots and recount them. One's $400,000 and one's like $20,000. And I don't know if we're actually going to do that. I know Maricopa County had talked about using the $400,000 one, but who's going to believe anything that ever comes out of that place again? So I don't know, but I hope that we do get a down ballot analysis of those other races, because it's very concerning.
It is, and it's important because every vote for every person should count for something. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And I think that it's telling that at a time when we've felt such a need to take all the efforts to put in a forensic audit, it's also at the same time that at the federal level, the Democratic Party is trying to pass something called HR 1, I love the title, right? The For the People Act, right? Which is basically for whatever party is currently in power, they get to federally control the elections moving forward. Bad idea. And
Very-
so it just is telling to me that they're trying to hedge their bets any way they can, that if they've got a foothold, they're going to keep that foothold. And takes us back to the Convention of States and term limits. We need term limits for sure. So,
Well, you're right about that. And if you get involved in the redistricting that's coming up later this year, Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, you can have your voice heard about redrawing the lines so that we could hopefully have better chances to get more Republican congressmen and women down there, and we can take back the House, down there in Washington. That's so important.
absolutely. And, it's not just about, voting and hiring with our votes somebody with an R blazing on their chest and their cape waving, because how many times have we seen that just because they're wearing the big red R, it doesn't mean that they behave that way with the way that they vote on things and write bills. And so it is important for us to do our due diligence at all times
And know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, Arizona Senator Kelly Townsend, thank you so much for all this time. Please tell folks how they can continue to follow all the important things that you're involved in, including the audit and pretty soon a re-election campaign.
Yeah. So I have been primarily on Telegram this year. And if you go to Telegram, it's just Senator Kelly Townsend. It's Kelly with a Y, Townsend, TOWNSEND. And then on Twitter, I'm not on Twitter as much. It's more like a piranha tank over there. But when I decide to jump into that, it's at AZ Kelly T, and you'll find me there. And I am also on Facebook, but I'm not on Facebook very much. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just not interested in what they are offering anymore. So,
It's true.
Well, Kelly,
KellyTownsend.com as well. Sorry. Go ahead.
taught me so much. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me on. God bless you guys. God bless America.
Yes.
God bless you. We will talk soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Fantastic.
You know-
Yes, KellyTownsend.com.
Right.
I kind of cut her off on
Yeah, I
that, but
did
it'll be
too.
on her guest page.
One of the best things about being on this show
Mhm.
is you learn so much.
Oh man.
And-
Yes.
And to know that, it's just amazing. Now, do you listen to what everybody says? Yes, but
Mhm.
then you research it.
Absolutely.
But man, I would love to be in the legislative office.
Mhm.
I would love to be there. I like if I was a representative, then I could say, "Do you follow the Constitution?" Or that doesn't follow the Constitution. What the heck are you doing here?
Mhm.
Get out.
Mhm.
Make room. There's plenty of people that want to follow the Constitution, but she is a constitutionalist. It's
She
awesome.
is, and it's always so refreshing, which
Yeah.
is weird, right? Why should it be refreshing to speak to an elected official who is a constitutionalist? It should be standard fare.
Right.
And I'll never forget that before this last election, the 2020 election, I was interviewed by the Swedish press, and they were interested in what's this whole thing about, carrying around. Okay, you want to own guns in America? Okay, fine. But you're like a female person and you want to carry around guns. So that was the reason for the interview. But they were asking about um, Kelly, Mark Kelly running against our current senator at the time and Martha McSally. And they said, they knew, I could tell by the way they asked it, I knew it was a gotcha
Yeah.
question. We're going to ask her, what do you think of Mark Kelly, who's a Democrat, whose wife runs the Giffords organization, that's an anti gun organization? What do you think about him running for office? And so instead of giving them their gotcha moment, I said, well, if he follows the Constitution, then why do I care what letter he wears on his jersey?
Problem is, he's not following the Constitution.
Problem is, he's not following the Constitution.
Right.
And no matter what
Yeah.
letter they're
What
wearing,
would it matter?
no matter
Yeah.
right what letter they're wearing, if they're not following the Constitution, then they would not deserve my vote nor get my
Right.
vote if I'm tapped in and I know what I'm
Right.
doing with my vote.
That's really interesting. The fact is, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat,
Mhm.
if you're not following the Constitution, you're not getting my vote.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And, it's the same thing where people just get all knee jerk reaction-y about everything. And you'll notice right down political party lines, which is bizarre. You say the word Arizona Election Integrity Audit, and you can pretty much tell, which party affiliation you're talking
Right.
to, depending on which side they are, whether they say, it's a bunch of wasted time and money, versus people that say, well, I'm really glad that's happening because why shouldn't we know?
Right.
Just check your work, right? We did that in math class growing up. The teacher wanted us to show our work and then she would
Right.
check our work.
And folks, just so you know, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but we had our audit back about 5 years ago with the IRS. We had an audit, which, by the
Our
way,
personal
audit, but we
finances.
won, by the way, first of
Mhm,
all.
mhm.
But let me just explain to you that they didn't just send a letter saying we're going to audit you. They started with, they asked a couple of questions by letter to comply with this. Then after that, we comply with that. Then they ask another. So they did that like 2 or 3 times when they finally said, we're doing a full blown audit. So it's no different. Okay. So yeah, you did your formal audit. Then you did your next check
Oh,
audit.
you're talking about how Governor Doug Ducey said
Right.
we've had 4 audits
Right.
already,
And so,
which we didn't. We
obviously
didn't have
there's
4
something in those
forensic
audits that's not right that makes
Right.
you want to go further.
Right.
So I will tell you this, the results of this audit, I feel that the right people are in there doing it, that
Mhm.
whatever the results of the audit, I will agree with.
Yeah.
I
we'll accept
trust
it.
what they're
Absolutely.
doing.
And the reason why we have to know is so that the next time there's an election, we can accept it.
Right.
Right.
That's the main reason I want to
And
know.
because right now things just feel wrong and they
Yeah.
smell funny. And so we want to check. We just want to look into it. But anyway, thank you again to all the people that are involved in that, all the volunteers.
Oh my gosh.
Holy cow.
They filled the whole Coliseum.
Yeah. People giving up hours and days of their life. Your most finite commodity is your time. They're giving it up to go be a part of this. People from every part of the political spectrum. They're
Right.
not all
Both
just
Democrats and
Republicans.
Republicans.
Yeah.
Yep.
Libertarians.
Because they want to know. There are Democrats that want to know too.
Yeah, they're being part of history
Yeah.
by giving up their time and checking
Yeah.
this, checking the work. So it's we really appreciate that. We appreciate our Arizona Senator Kelly Townsend
Yes.
so much for her time to share all of her wisdom, and if you've missed any part of this show or any other show, maybe you caught a piece of one and didn't get back to it, you can go to, for the audio only version, go to our website, gunfreedomradio.com, click the on demand tab and binge listen to your heart's content. You can click the guest tab and see photos and bios and links to all the guests we've ever had on the show, including today, Arizona Senator Kelly Townsend. And
You can also go to YouTube, but you might not be able to after they hear the word election results, election audit.
Yeah, no
That
doubt.
might be something that gets us kicked off. We might go to prison for a couple weeks.
YouTube prison.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we do a video version. People like to watch these shows often. And so we have YouTube channel, we have a gun streamer channel. And we're trying
OpsLens.
to fix our link on opslens.com, which is a smartphone app. Our link's been broken for a while. We keep hearing from people, and I don't know, it's a process, I guess. But we are working on that. And again, your time is your most finite commodity. And when you spend it with us, that is everything. Thank you so much to our amazing listeners all over the world. All right. So until next time,
Pray for our nation.
pray for our elected officials who are statesmen, right?
Statesmen, yeah.
Isn't that
Even
what
though,
she said?
yeah.
Not
yeah.
politicians,
Right.
but statesmen. So pray for our statesmen. Maybe that's the new thing I should say. What do
Yeah.
you think?
And even the politicians that you don't like.
Maybe
See, I didn't say
especially
statements.
the politicians
Because I would like a
that
statement,
you don't
right?
like.
I
That's
would like
true.
a statement.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. So until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye-bye.